Podcasters Roundtable round 154, Finding Untapped Podcast Fans. As I wrote that title, I thought to myself, I probably named a round that before, so I'm going to have to go look that up. Dave can scour the archive while we're sitting here. Don't do that, Dave. Don't waste your time. But it's because we're talking about one of the stories we'll be talking about is different ways to find podcast fans. I'm not sure that's what the story was about, but that's what I took from it. So we'll get into that. It's everyone's favorite topic. How do I grow my show? How do I find more listeners? So we're coming back at you with another one of those. That and gear. Dave, if we just talk about gear and marketing, we'd probably be one of those nominated shows. Another tease. We will get to that as well. Let's meet the roundtable, including, I think, 2 new roundtablers. So co-host Dave Jackson, obviously not new to the show. Welcome back, bud.
Yeah, glad to be here. Dave Jackson from the schoolofpodcasting.com.
All right. And Noel, welcome to your first roundtable.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. My name is Noel, co-host and creator of Hidden Gems, a film podcast.
Very cool. A film podcast. Do you do reviews? Is that what that is?
Yeah. What we do is, it's a little twist on the review because we don't do any spoilers. But what we do, because we're Hidden Gems, we recommend and talk about underrated and underappreciated films, whether they're kind of just under the radar for whatever reason, or they're, fantastic films that people have forgotten about. We go ahead and we talk about it. So we don't spoil it because we want people to go out and see it, but that's what we do. So we talk about underrated and underappreciated films.
Awesome. Well, if you're listening to this and that piques your interest, check that out. That's how we find, there's one way to grow your show, right?
One way.
Just get on the roundtable. Check. Done. All right. Hey, and another new roundtabler, Roger, welcome.
Hey, everyone. I'm Roger Nairn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Jar Audio. And Jar Audio is a podcast production agency that works exclusively with brands to help them get into the podcast space. And we're a full service agency. So we do everything from strategy to production to distribution and everything in between.
Roger, sliding in on a technicality, sort of. Usually you have a podcast to be on the roundtable. Roger doesn't have one, but he's now a podcaster because he's a guest, so I think it qualifies. But no, you work so closely with so many podcasts and in the space, and I've read the articles on the site that completely qualify. You have to be
awesome.
I think podcast adjacent is probably enough now to get on the roundtable.
Yeah, I mean, we're podcast Sherpas, but we're just, we're helping people into the knapsack and taking them up the hill. We're not necessarily climbing the mountain ourselves.
Nice. Right on.
Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, I got it. I got
Perfect sense, man.
I'm with you. It's like a song where the artist doesn't tell you what it really means. You interpret it for yourself. So I hope everyone took something different.
Like, we're the passengers and you're the train, man. We're just
Totally.
Just true, brother. True.
The thing is, if you're watching podcastersroundtable.com/live, then you can ask those questions in the comments if we didn't make it clear for you. So we like to be vague to intrigue interest and get engagement. We're just podcast hacking here, the live way, which is going to be a little bit of what we're going to talk about too. So I'm hinting at a lot of stories. Let's just start getting into those. Noel, I'm going to let you kick it off. You can pick either one. Actually, let's go with the very first one you have, the virtual podcasting event. What is going on with that?
Sure. So as of right now, I believe actually this is the last day of Podfest. So this is a convention. It's a podcast convention, and it is a fascinating space that podcasters or people in the industry, people who are interested in podcasting, whether they host shows or we're on your train, Roger. They come in and they sign up to, different events, virtual events, where they're able to sit and watch, very similar to what we're doing right now, and listen to professionals, people who have been in the industry for quite some time, people who have skills and knowledge of podcasting to try to help the podcasting community. And it's going on for a number of days, and it's absolutely fantastic.
Dave, did you speak? Dave, this year?
I did. I had a talk, spent $100 on a microphone and 100 hours getting to know your audience was my topic.
Nice.
And
This
it was
is
a lot of
hashtag
fun,
not
actually.
sponsored. We're not Podfest sponsored. but-
Yeah.
I also spoke at the event, and it was it was my first time doing it, and it was fantastic. It was a really, really well run event. Those guys are amazing. I can't even imagine how tired they are at this point.
So how did it work? How was it virtually as compared to like, normally you'd be at Podfest, right?
Well, here's the thing. This is actually this month. It would make a year of me podcasting. So I'm coming up on my anniversary soon. So I'm super excited about that. Within last year, I was able to attend last year's Podfest, and it was the first one that was virtual because of obviously the COVID-19. So all I know is virtual conventions. I can imagine. I mean, I've been to other conventions before, like New York Comic Con and things like that. So it's very tangible. But as far as the virtual aspect of it, for me, again, I didn't have anything to compare it to in regards to a live convention, but it was absolutely informative. I learned so much going into that convention. I took away so much, especially this year being my first year. I was really able to come away and put a lot of the things and the skills and the ideas that I've learned into my show. So I can't compare, again, live to virtual, but as far as the format is concerned, it was very organized. I think this year was just even better. They learned a lot of lessons from last year to this year. And again, we're not sponsoring it, but I can't sing its praises anymore. It's, again, just a fantastic time.
Well, I'm dying to
Roger.
know.
Oh, go ahead,
I got to pop in here. You said there was so much that you took away. What was your top takeaway?
Oh my goodness. Again, I learned so much because it was my first year. So one was how to grow the audience. Two was how to edit audio. I've never edited audio before. This is kind of my first step into audio editing. I come from a film background. I'm a writer and screenplay writer, and I was a former struggling actor, I should say. And so this was kind of like the first step into any sort of audio development, whether again it's podcast or radio or what have you. So I was coming in very green. So any information that I got was just, for me, it was just gold. Cool. And again, what I took away most was how to engage your audience, how to authentically market, and again, how to kind of develop your audio editing skills and microphone technique and things like that. Yeah. Very basic 101 stuff. But again, for someone who's kind of just stepping into it and going, you know what, I want to make a podcast, because I was thinking about it for many years. And I finally kind of just jumped into it. It was just absolutely invaluable.
For me, I think the biggest difference is when you go to an event, you're at the event, you're focused on the event, and if you got kids, they're handled. If you got a job, they know you're not there.
Right.
And so for me, it was different because I was doing my job as I was at the event. So that I had a hard time going away to watch presentations. There were no drinking parties at night. So that was, and I did see where there were a lot of events, and that was the only thing that I had a lot going. That's the problem again. Because I was home, I had a lot of stuff that I could work on here, where if I was there, I would have said, that's going to have to wait till I get home.
Right.
And so there was a constant battle of this and that. And I know at one point I turned on the Hoova app and my phone burst into flames. There were so many invites to stuff. And I was like, but I did go to an event last night, and it was, I wish I could remember the platform. It was Air something. And you walked in and you basically had speed dating. It just matched you up with somebody, and you had like the minute you both connected, you had like 8 minutes to say what you did. And that was really cool, because that's the part I miss.
Was it video?
It was video. It was Air something. I wish.
Yeah, whatever. It'll be something else tomorrow. So the name
exactly.
doesn't matter, but
so that was cool, and they did a good job of sending people to the booths, because
that's
no sponsors, no event. Trust me on that.
What do you mean sent you to the booth? Like,
meaning they had dedicated.
Dedicated
Yeah.
rooms.
Yeah, they had
They
dedicated
put you in
Zoom
there?
rooms. Yeah, and they would basically say, "Hey, at 9:30 there are no sessions. Everybody go to a booth."
I mean,
And so-
really, when you think about that, like, because this is a problem we have to solve now, right? Because we have virtual events, but it's also going to be probably some type of hybrid model, something we're going to move to in the future. And, you know, even the organization that I work for, different ones I work with, are struggling with even events before COVID. It's harder to get people to big events. I've seen niche events doing a little better, but big events can be a trick. And then sponsorships for that and a booth, that's always how to get people. But, you know, sponsors probably need to be more, they need to adopt our model and become content creators, right? So the sponsor, like, it should be sponsored, maybe sponsored talks, right? If you're Libsyn, you're Rob on stage. Rob always talks, right? He's a walking infomercial for Libsyn while not promoting Libsyn. He's giving you great content. Like, I always go to Rob's talk, even though I'm like, I know everything Rob's going to say. And then I learn one or two things different because he gives great stats. That's almost your booth, right? Like, it feels like, because, you know, you're not going to, a lot of booths I'm not going to go to, but if there was someone from that company giving a great talk, I mean, Roger, this might be, I mean, maybe that's exactly what you're doing, Roger.
No, I was giving a talk on the three lessons we've learned from working with some of the world's biggest brands. When it, with a podcast lens on it, obviously.
But you are also, I mean, you've got people's attention. You are Jar Audio at that moment, right? Like, the key is to give something people want, but then they learn about Jar Audio.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. I didn't actually consider sponsoring the event because I had a hard time nailing down who the audience was within that group, because I'll say that and I by no means want to knock them, because I think that what they're doing is incredible, but they've got this mission of being Guinness World Record breaking, the largest audience, or the largest attended virtual podcasting event, which I think is amazing. But at the same time, it almost kind of waters it down, because it's just so big that it's hard to focus. And I had the same problem kind of. I would actually say that kind of working from home and doing other things was good. It was good for me to be able to kind of duck in and duck out, but I also kind of found it being so big and so many options that the ADD in me had a hard time kind of focusing. And I would say from a marketing perspective, as somebody who wants to get people's attention, I struggle to figure out kind of how to channel that out and where to find them. And after my talk, I jumped into the exhibitors area, and it was interesting because a lot of it was just brands playing YouTube videos it was just a demo reel, and then they were available to answer any questions. And I thought that was
have to be in there.
Given we're all in the podcast space. Like, how could you not get in front of a microphone and turn your camera on and just talk?
You have to be talking,
and then take a moment for answering questions and stuff. So
that's a failure of imagination on their part. Like, you got to be, especially if you're in charge of Dave. Oh, wait, we could be just trashing Dave. Dave, did you have a booth that you had to?
Well, I know there was I know there was an area for that, because I know we had a video. They had it like for the person's like, what is this? You had like explainer videos of what you did, but no, we actually had a Zoom room on 9 and 1 and 4. We would go in and we were demoing Libsyn 5. We were answering questions, and then in some cases we'd go, on complete tangents into podcast land, talk about whatever people wanted to talk about.
So I have a question, Dave. Then, and you may not know the answer, but I'd be really curious to find out from like Rob or someone, the difference. Like, did you exhibiting live, or virtually, just like no customers, whereas opposed, did you guys get the same that you would get at an in-person conference, or was it a total flop for you? We can't say for all sponsors, but for someone who's exhibiting in a booth, I wonder, because that's tough.
I think, it is tough, because I don't, we have a booth, we have a big backdrop, we've got all the business cards out, and people are coming to our booth, and if nothing else, they see our brand. So
do people sign up there, or do you know if you're actually getting people?
We had a promo code. So if you used, Podfest Global, that would get you a free month there. And we had some people pretty much sign up right there. They're like, hey, give me a demo. You do a demo. Okay, great. Where do I sign up? So that was cool.
So it worked. I mean, it did work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a matter of the number of people. It's hard to say. The other thing that's different is, and this is what was so funny, because we'd have a booth and you'd have 5 people come into your Zoom room. And I'm here to tell you, it was one extreme or the other. It'd be like, okay, if you have any questions about Libsyn or podcasting in general, you don't have to turn your camera on. If you don't want to turn it, you just throw it in the chat and you would get, and I'm here to tell you, crickets, like nothing, zip. And you're like, okay, so what have you learned at Podfest so far?
And
So you had the ultra introverts. Then the next booth time, hey, 4:00 here rolls around and you'd have somebody come in. Oh, cool, Libsyn booth. Hey, and they're just yip. And they're just
it feels like running a live stream. Like, what's the difference? Like, if we show up to the roundtable with no topics, that's not going to be good, right?
Yeah, well, we were ready. I was always ready to do a Libsyn 5 demo, but we'd always start off with, do you have any questions we could help you with? And if they didn't have any questions, I'd just go into a demo. But it was kind of interesting to have the fact that nobody would even say, no questions for me. Like, it was just nothing. Or it was, oh my gosh, I have so many questions, and it's just, Captain Bubbly.
That's where you got to have like breakout, like Zoom, I don't know what platform, breakout, like have more than one person handling it. And they're like, okay, go with Dave. He's going to answer that question. We're still going to present. Like, you just got to think about it, right? If I did this in 30 seconds, like these companies, come on, you guys. Like,
yeah. So it was, all in all, it was, I'll be interested to see what the numbers are, but, we had a fair number of people come through, so it was cool.
Awesome. All right. Way too much time on a #not-sponsored conference. Podfest, we want some money. No, but thanks, Noel.
Oh, you're welcome, man.
That is interesting. And you know what? I did have one of the quotes that I pulled from that article. Said, even though I had access to the recordings, I'm staying up late each night to watch them live, which I thought, this is something we hear, and it's very interesting because there is something different about live. I mean, being here right now, we do this live, the roundtable. And something about being in the chat is different. Now, I failed hardcore and didn't put enough notice out, so we probably don't have a big chat tonight. That's my bad. What's new? But there's something, people have paid and they have access to the recordings, but being there live, knowing that those people are there live, and maybe sometimes in the case of, I don't edit much this doesn't get edited so much outside of like technical edits, but you may attend a live event where it does get chopped up. And so you might miss something that is, you could miss something. In fact, I would almost encourage I would encourage a tight edit just for good content consumption later on, but there's probably a model there to help people. I don't say hold stuff back or take stuff out, but you might miss something funny that just might not make.
Yeah. I know I did about 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. So that was kind of cool that, you can't ask a question if you're not watching live. So.
Right. Awesome. All right. Well, let's move on. So Roger, you can give us either one of your stories here.
Yeah, the first one is I guess sort of no surprise, but sort of a surprise. I guess it's a surprise. It's a surprise, but
it's a big surprise, and I'm skeptical, and I don't even know what story you're going to bring up.
It is, and you're right to be skeptical. The first one is that according to eMarketer, they're saying that Spotify will be taking over Apple in total US podcast listeners.
Does eListener have a Spotify exclusive podcast?
They do not. Yeah.
Just checking.
And I mean, I think where the skeptical, you somewhat skeptical. There is no source for where they're getting the information from, but they are claiming that it's true. And I mean, I guess the question is kind of what's going on at Apple when it comes to podcasts, and where's their head at? I know there's a lot of exciting things apparently coming, but not too much has been announced, anytime soon, or I know there's a bit of a user interface, a change coming, but
When Rob said in his talk that the whole 300 display limit, where you'd see that's going away.
right.
So that could be interesting to say the least.
But it just seems that Spotify's done an amazing job of courting the creator and the different sort of niches within it. Obviously, music aside, they've done really good. They've done a really good job of embracing, sort of the hobby podcaster, as well as the business side, as well as the larger brands that want to play a role in podcasting, as well as the advertisers. And it just seems like they've really done a good job this year. And I think it's those numbers make a lot of sense, given the connection to music, and the user experience seems to just be improving.
I saw someone tweet out, would you rather have your podcast inside your music app or basically not, right?
Separate,
separate. And
see, that's my question. I'm like, if you look at Google, they mixed music and podcasting and broke out podcasting. Apple broke out podcasting and music. And I'm like, because I don't know about you, I tried to listen to some podcasts on Spotify. That is not a good experience.
You want to make me a believer with this report? I want to see retention stats, right? So we know, I mean, you can go into, all of us can take our podcast and go look in our Apple dashboard. Why did I say it like that? Our Apple dashboard.
The dashboard.
And it's very, very musical.
The dashboard.
That's the rebranding that's coming. I couldn't tell you about it. It's out now. The NDA is lifted. You have to say it on dashboard. Anyways, we know that podcasts do really well. Long format does really well. A lot of people are seeing 60, 70, 90% of their episodes being listened to. Is that happening on Spotify, right? There's this crazy number of podcasts. We did a roundtable story, I think last time, Dave, where we talked about like the majority of new podcasts are on Spotify or something like that. And it was an Anchor thing, right? So yeah, we know lots of stuff gets started in Anchor. The fantastic thing about Anchor is it lets anyone try it, but then they're gone, right? Like maybe like one of the 5 that are started actually might stick around for 10 episodes. So are people sampling? Is Spotify showing people podcasts that they're pressing play and then skipping? Is it a, Dave, what did you say? Is it a
training?
Is it a streaming versus download thing? Like we just don't know enough, because it does seem hard to believe that they would. And this was a monthly. I think in that article I saw, it was like 28 million listens next month versus like a 23 million. Let me work on that. For 23 million. I know it's not Dave. I know Dave doesn't have any. Your cats don't talk now, right?
That's my toddler.
Your cats talk?
It's totally fine. I have kids that can run in and tackle me at any moment. So
that's wonderful.
But Dave, so like, maybe not, right?
Well, Spotify came out with a video about Stream On, and their whole thing was painting about how the thing I loved about it is everything they said was with absolute confidence that, they could say anything, but they said it with such confidence that, I have 7 toes and, I'm going to dump fish sticks in my, it was just like, what? It was weird. But so I give them credit. It was very Apple-esque. And they just said it in such a way that you have to be on Spotify. But they had a whole section on like, and this is what drives me bonkers. They're like, hey, we're having a problem with podcast advertising. And I'm like, really? Because the last time I checked, we're outperforming newspapers, radio. People are dumping billions into radio ads, but we still outperform them. TV, blah, blah, blah. But no, we've solved it. We're going to go streaming. And I was like, yeah, you're going to go streaming because you can get that extra Facebook, give me the 35-year-old guy in Idaho who likes to listen to, Taylor Swift on Tuesday kind of detail that you can't get from anything else. But yet we're outperforming everything else except Facebook because you get all this insane detail. And they just made that part sound like, oh, streaming is so much better for you. And I'm like, I don't know that are people like going, let me see. I could listen in Overcast, or I could listen. Is there anyone that would put more ads in front of me? Because I'm really looking for more ads. And I was like, ugh. So that would be that was an interesting thing. And
There was like
and
five. There was like five things you've said that I wanted to like break out and discuss. I think you have to be so far down the rabbit hole, which I think our audience is, to understand
Yeah.
half of what you said. But I'm like,
well,
wait,
and
what?
they kept pointing out how they've helped musicians make money, and I was like, really?
What are
That's
we
what
talking
you're
about
gonna
now? Spotify?
Spotify. Yeah, it's like
Right.
and there was a guy there that had like 1 billion streams, so they're not lying. But I'm like,
I mean, technically, yes.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah, but how much money is
So
going
it was
into his
just
pocket,
like-
though?
we're gonna help
Yeah.
podcasters make money like musicians, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's
It's
a
not
good.
how I don't listen. People aren't going to listen to round 154 every day,
Yeah.
5 times, 100 times. Not
They
the same.
should.
Yeah.
You should not.
Well, that was my thing. We should
No
get paid
else,
by the minute, right? Because you get paid X amount of money for a song. It's 4 minutes long.
Right.
We put out something an hour long. We should get paid, whatever, 12 times
You're not getting
whatever
paid,
a song
Dave.
makes. Yeah,
Just
we're not.
give it up.
It's not happening.
Dave, you got exposure. I thought I saw a great meme, or maybe not even meme, just a post that showed like the old Oregon Trail, but it was like content creator dies of exposure, which I thought was
I've never beaten that game.
no. I
Nobody
mean,
has.
Gracious.
yeah,
So
yeah. You
hard.
have to just. That's almost
point.
a classic joke. It's like saying, I don't know. I'm trying to think of something very old that we all refer to. No one's ever actually played a game of.
Snakes and ladders.
Yeah,
There we go.
Life.
life.
Life was great.
Well, here's the question: Has anyone listened to Joe Rogan since he moved to Spotify? Because I have not.
I didn't
I
listen
used
to
to.
Forbes.
I used to
I have
look
not.
in my app. I would look in Overcast, see who we interviewed, and then I would go to YouTube to watch it.
I was gonna say that's not
because-
true. I never listened, but I did see clips on YouTube. This is like the beauty of YouTube is, I mean, think of late night talk shows, right? Like
Right.
I don't watch Jimmy Fallon, but I will have seen several clips of Jimmy Fallon.
Right.
My wife and I spend an hour, maybe 2, in front of the TV a couple of weeks ago, watching nothing but Howard Stern clips because of the musical performances. Like, we don't listen to Howard Stern, but we sat there for 2 hours and consumed the musical performances. Like YouTube is great for this, and yeah, that he pulled off of. So did I just see? Was it in that article though? There was something about Rogan returning. So now I heard they're putting stuff in the old RSS feed.
Yeah.
This was an open podcast article I read. I don't remember what it was. You're shaking your head, Roger. Do you know what that was about?
No, you were right. That is what they're doing. That's all. I had nothing to add that other than that I saw the same article.
Right. So essentially, they're like, we're not reaching. It doesn't feel like they're not
Yeah.
reaching.
Right.
Well, I mean,
It has a
Amy.
Spotify ad at the end too. Sorry, Dave. Just like you're like, how is this possible? Because Joe Rogan went Spotify exclusive. He's locked in. They did a video for him. I don't know if that's even a thing. I don't know what they're doing, but it sounds like Spotify also is like, oh crud, we shoved so much money into this hole and we're not getting enough out of it.
yeah.
So they're starting to put stuff back in the open podcast feed where anyone can get it. And then they're
Right.
just like, I know the compromise will jam a Spotify ad. The best part is they're putting it at the end. No one listens to the end.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They don't?
Well, I'm just noticing a trend. Amy Schumer was exclusive, and then she wasn't, and then Michelle Obama was exclusive, and then she wasn't, and now
It's great. There's some combo of greatness there. Like the whole windowing thing. Like, look,
Yeah.
if you're Serial and you're coming back and you end up coming back a week early on Spotify, like as a listener, I am totally fine with that. I'm like, I'm not going to pay to listen. I will wait a week, right? But for people who want to pay and get it now, or people who are on the platform as a perk, like there's some combination of holding back or going exclusive, but going pure exclusive where something was open before.
You know what it is? I think it just triggers something in our psyche, in our humanity, and I think our character. Because I think as podcasters and the community of podcasters, we're kind of like inherent rebels in a way. So
Right,
once
someone told
kinda-
you can't have this.
Right. Exactly, right? Oh, you want to be like a radio DJ star? Well, you can't, and now, you have a podcast and you have 200 episodes. But once you put that stamp of exclusive on something, it just I think in specifically for our community, it just leaves a really bad taste in people's mouths. And it's like, I don't know about it. No matter how great the content may be, guess what? There's probably another podcast very similar to it where you can find it,
Or we're going to start seeing pirates.
That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Well, that exists. I mean, almost going back to the Rogan example on YouTube, I don't think any clip I ever saw show up in my feed came from his channel. It's from someone who ripped it and put it on there, right? Because they want to get ad revenue against it. And the bots will prevent this. Like I'm sure, they'll be able to fight against that. There'll always be some level of that. But even podcasters, I'm sure I know have had whole podcasts stolen. Right?
Yeah, there's a problem where if you have a really popular show, I can go grab the feed, import it into Anchor, and run ads against it. And it's just creating they've tried. I know Adam Curry and his Podcasting 2.0 project has a thing where you can check a box to lock it. But here's the thing. Potentially, right? Somebody that's doing this, that's copying a feed, throwing it in Anchor, probably a little more technical than the average Joe. This is not, this is somebody who understands podcasting. And all you got to do is open up that RSS feed, copy and paste it into a text file, throw it on a different address, and guess what? You got their RSS feed. So I appreciate the effort because they're like, oh, this is like a domain lock. And I'm like, not that I've seen really, because you got to do a lot of hokey pokey to get a domain released when you transfer it to somebody else with special codes back and forth. And I'm like, I don't, I probably shouldn't comment because I don't know that much about the lock thing besides it's a check mark and it stops people, but I don't know that it's quite as extensive as an actual domain lock. So I need to investigate that and get back. But when I first heard it, I'm like, well, if that's just going to stop it, there are always ways around it. I always tell people if I can hear it and if I can see it, I can steal it. And that person is never going to pay for it anyway.
Have you guys listened to Obama and Springsteen?
Not yet. It's on my library.
I don't pay for. Is that a premium? Is it paid only? So that's interesting to me, right? Because what's the model there? The model is to get people onto Spotify. I mean, this is the whole point, right? Spotify. I mean, it's
also being brought. It's also brought to you by Starbucks.
Right. So so it's branded, or I mean, obviously, Roger, you would have some insight into what's going on. Like the whole play is just to get people to listen, not to come to Spotify, right? Which is not necessarily a bad play. I mean, Netflix is killing it with this model, with making the most awesome original programming.
Totally. And
you go to Netflix now. You can't consume some Netflix things for free. Netflix, you should probably do that, but it sounds like Spotify is doing that, right, Roger?
So with, a lot of it's. Sorry, is it available for free? I mean, I think you still need to have a Spotify account.
Right, sign up. Right, free account.
But that is something they should be trying is offering something for free before you get the account for sure. But I think a lot of this is great. It's just more content, and I agree that there will come a point where we're going to start having to pay for these things, and we're becoming it's becoming more routine. And I mean, we just saw Twitter. Twitter's announced that they're going to start playing with the idea of charging for sort of super content or super follower status, that you'll get certain content from people. I think it's become part of our psyche, like to your point, and no surprise.
Yeah. You brought up the Springsteen Obama. Have you listened to it? Because I haven't.
I haven't myself. No, I haven't. I was curious to get your guys' take.
Well, they had a clip of it on that, Stream On thing that I was talking about before. And I have tried like hard. I have invested hours into understanding the magic of Bruce Springsteen, and please don't send me your hate. I just don't get that.
It's fine. This is, we could go down the line and say, like, there are bands like people love Rush. People never heard of Don't Listen to Rush. Don't get it, right? Like, we all have these.
Fish.
And to be honest with you, I'm
like, don't get it.
Yeah. There's a time I was out in Idaho with the band, and you're like, oh, just shut up and get to the point.
Dude, you're from Jersey. Relax.
So,
every time I see him with a cowboy hat, I'm like, dude, you're from Jersey. What are you doing?
Well, it was kind of like the whole, like, how do you ruin Metallica? You put Lou Reed with him. And I'm like, to me, Obama is a charismatic kind of guy, and I would listen to his podcast until you threw Springsteen in the mix. I'm like, I got to sit through
the only
Springsteen
thing
to
I
get to
know-
Obama.
The only thing I know about it is that I saw a promo picture and Springsteen was way too far from the SM7B and it was driving me crazy. But I wanted to listen for that reason only. I wanted to say, does it sound like The Room? Because you know what? When you get those two caliber of people on a podcast, they have a huge production team and there's always some kind of magic. I'm like, how in the world can anyone sit that far from an SM7B and sound that good? So I'm going to have to listen for that reason. And it could be just a photo. Perspective is a weird thing.
Yeah.
They probably emailed Bandrew, who's in the chat, and it's probably all fine now. So
I know one of the conversations is around, they titled it Renegade or the Renegade podcast or something. And a lot of people are saying that they don't consider either of them necessarily a renegade.
isn't that just didn't he do it's a song or an album or something?
It's all tied to the song and the album. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, something like that.
What a quinky dink. Yeah.
What all right, let's get on here. Let's find let's see. Noel, let's go back to your second story.
Sure. So my second story was really interesting, and it kind of hit home for me because, as I mentioned before, this is my first year into podcasting. So a lot of the things that I've learned, I've kind of just learned on the way. And one of those things is obviously reaching an audience and growing your audience. As an independent podcaster, I do this kind of as a hobby, but what was fascinating to me was this article about these group of guys that started a Facebook back in 2019, so not too long ago. And they just developed this massive following of listeners and people just by what I mentioned before was like this authentic networking. So reaching out to people of their community and just amassing this army of followers. So I found this article absolutely fascinating because it was so quick. It was such an explosion of popularity from these this podcast genealogy guys, and it's really important that what they did was they kind of focused on their people, on their audience, on their subject, and I think anyone can take away from that would be focusing on your audience. Who is your audience? Who is your target demographic? And reach out to them. There has to be some form of tangible connection there, and just what these guys were able to do in such a short period of time was pretty remarkable.
So for me, I actually didn't feel like it kind of opens. So what is this? The title is How the Genealogy Guys Went from No Facebook Group to an Online Community of 13,000 plus in 1 month. So
yeah,
they had a podcast, but then the article is really not about a podcast, although you can take something away from it big time, where I thought this is kind of where I took the name from of this episode, finding the untapped podcast audience. Right. So if you're watching this, we're 38 minutes in. I buried the lead. I think that's how that works. But here we go. Here's the payoff. So it all made sense. It's very much like podcasting, right? The more specific you are, the more that you're talking to one type of person who's interested in one thing, the more likely you are to surface. So they had a podcast, and what I didn't get from the article was what this did for their podcast. They started a Facebook group for genealogy. There were already Facebook groups that existed, and they grew really fast. This is a no-brainer. Like if you're talking about something like genealogy, there's a massive amount of people on Facebook, period, but they're going to be interested in that topic. So it's much easier, and the threshold of joining a group, Facebook will even help you because they'll show it to you. So you can reach a lot more people, potentially talk to a lot more people in a group like that who's very specific, focused on one topic, than you would a podcast. But if you have a podcast, then obviously that organically gets surfaced in that group, and you're suddenly in front of a ton of people who are interested in your podcast who never before would have found your podcast. Right. Now, you're probably going to scrape still a very small percentage of people away from a group to a podcast because A lot of people just don't want to listen to an hour-long podcast of even the thing they love. But the point is, you will find people that you didn't before, and it is always about one person, and you never know where that's going to go. Who's that going to be? They turn into co-hosts. They turn into major sponsors. They turn into the person that introduces 3 other people. So yeah, if you're very specific, if you can tell me what one word, it's like Oprah. If you can give me the one word version of your podcast, like there's an audience to be tapped that you're not reaching. So no surprise that they grew fast on a platform that categorizes people by their interest, right? So
I think also just the knowing a few, having a few friends that have done the genealogical thing, and also a lot of the people that do that are obviously looking to make the connections with their ancestors and all that sort of stuff. They're all over social, and so I'm also like not surprised at all that they would would be attracted to something like a community, because they're probably all sitting there listening to the podcast, saying, I wish we could all talk together, because they love to swap stories and success stories and all that sort of stuff. So that's really interesting.
That gives you the other thing you can't do with a podcast, which is the audience cannot
engage
meet the audience
with each other.
Right. Right. So now, because you really, if you're a good host, you're really just connecting your audience to each other, I think. And so, probably several of us have Facebook pages. I had one that was decent, but Facebook doesn't show you unless you pay. It doesn't show the stuff you're trying to communicate to your audience. It's a whole different topic. But, another thing about this page is that they were in touch and aware and communicating with other genealogy pages. It's not like, again, don't go to a platform and say it already exists. Don't think of a podcast and then be like, there's already a podcast about podcasting. I'm not going to start one.
Right.
Do it. Most of them start and go away. You have a different perspective. All those reasons, right? So they were able to get those established pages to mention that they had started a page, right? It is still, again, a community. So we could do this with the Roundtable. If we started a page about podcasting, there's a huge community of podcasters. Suddenly they would know of the Roundtable. And it's amazing how far down you can be in a community and still not even know that person or that content or the creator exists. I've done this and been like, you've been talking about podcasting for years? How did I miss this, right? So the more connections you can make, the better.
The other interesting part of this story, as I dug into it, they've been podcasting for 14 years. They started in 2005 and they started the group in 2019.
They're OGs.
And here's the sad part. When you go to their listing in Apple Podcast, they have not had an episode out in 2021 yet. Their last episode was December 2020.
Maybe
so
they're just
that's
a page
Everyone's
now,
going
right?
to the podcast group to ask what the hell's going on.
They're just reaching accomplishing their goals on the group page. They're like, we don't need a podcast anymore.
Yeah. Or they're looking for topic ideas.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah, I mean, someone who's podcast that long, that's
Well, you can see where they were super consistent, weekly, twice a month, once a month. And I'm like, uh-oh.
I mean, they talk about, so this is important, actually. This is a good takeaway here, because when you're a content creator, you create a podcast, you're like, great, I need to put it on Twitter. Oh, I better put it on Instagram. Better start a Snapchat. Better have a Facebook group. Suddenly, all your time is running social, not making your podcast. Right. And social is not the thing that's going to make the difference. The podcast is going to make the difference. The content's going to make the difference. So be careful, because they talk about in that article that, it's a massive lift, right? When you find out there's this community, you have to feed the beast, right? So be careful. Again, I think I've said that like 4 times in the last 30 seconds. I'm not saying don't try those things, but, is your audience there? Do you have the time? Everything that you do after starting a podcast really needs to become, do I have space for that extra thing? Because, Noel, you're a hobby podcaster like most of us here. There's barely time for that. It's already a labor of love. Yeah. So, and we've probably all created some page and then it just sort of sits there and we don't do anything with it.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
not fair to the audience at that point.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Good takeaway to come from that.
Feed the beast.
Feed the beast.
Yeah,
it's the churn, man. It never
you.
stops.
You feed the beast, it'll eat you alive.
And this is on a website, indiepodcastnews.com. And that's the first I've ever heard of it. So
So
I'll
wait,
have to-
that wasn't in my recommended. Is it in my recommended? No. Oh yeah, I do have. Oh, that's new. So that is someone. Podcastersroundtable.com/guest. If you'd like to be a guest, submit there. I'll eventually get to you. We'll get on the roundtable. But that's something that's fairly new. They asked about some kind of partner. I said, you know what? I'll throw the website as recommended where we get stories from, and all I know from it. So it is new, Dave. But it is in my recommended email to guests to be like, if you need help finding stories, here are a few places. Pod News, a couple other places.
Interesting.
This
I'll
is
have to
where we
check it
pull
out.
all our stories from. Podcast Business Journal. So shout outs to the places we get our stories from. And actually, Roger, I thought you might pull. I expected Roger to show up with stories from his own website because I saw you had some good articles there. But kudos for not being completely self-promotional.
Well,
But there was good stuff.
thank you.
So you can go to Jar. This is a plug. You can go to Jar Audio. You guys have some good blog posts on podcasts.
Thank you. Yeah, we do some webinars as well.
Nice.
Thanks.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, speaking of, let's toss back to Roger for your second story.
Yeah, the nominations for the Ambi Awards, or the Ambies, which
Ambies. What is that?
this is the first year of the Ambies, which is the awards put out by the Podcast Academy.
I could then again say, what is that?
Yeah. And the answer to that is I don't know what that is.
Dave should know. I should
The
know.
turtles don't go all the way down.
I'm in it. I think I've paid for whatever.
Yeah, I'm in it. I help.
What is it, Dave?
It's that's hard. That's the fun question. I'm in it, but I don't know what it is. It was supposed to be, podcasters talking about like the thing that Adam Curry is doing right now with podcasting 2.0, where the dog or the tail is trying to position itself to wag the dog instead of vice versa, because we're kind of all, and God bless Apple, I love them, but like if we want anything done in podcasting, we have to go, please more, sir, can we have another tag, please? And so Adam Curry's trying to position it to where we go, hey, why don't we all agree to this? And then Apple, if they're going to stay relevant. And that's an interesting concept. So this was kind of supposed to be that. They were going to look at things that were affecting podcasters. And so far, and again, it's early, they made an award show.
I feel like this was the union for independent podcasters. Like independent podcasters are independent. So we don't have a voice that can push industry.
Right.
And so from what I got, the impression was that, and Rob Greenlee was part of the co-founding of this. And so I thought the whole idea was let's give independent podcasters a voice that can be at the table when big things happen. So we could say, hey, you better pay attention to us, right? Because most of the industry, even though you only see the top 1%, which we might see in these awards, which is very ironic, I have to say. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah,
Maybe it's not
I know the Podcast Academy is trying to, literally from their site, advance the cultural merit of the medium, which
so it's not indie focused per se.
It's
I'm
not.
getting
And actually,
an impression that it is.
they've got an event coming up on March the 16th, which is all about the monetization of your podcast. So, not that an indie podcaster can't still, obviously monetize, but I love seeing the breadth and diversity of the different titles that have been at least nominated. And you saw a wide range. They weren't all about COVID. It was coming from the big guys, the small guys, different producers and distributors. And I just loved thumbing through it and not seeing things that I necessarily would have expected, which I think is great for the entire industry. I come from the advertising world, so from my perspective, I was getting into the podcast space. I was always a bit leery when I saw things like awards, because awards in the advertising world became such a cottage industry in and of itself, and it was kind of it got to the point where it was quite disgusting, to be honest, of how expensive an entry was and how competitive it got, and how we called them dog walker ads, where you would you would find a client just because you had an idea that could potentially win an award, and you could game the entire system. And I guess, I mean, maybe I'm being naive, but I guess it's, to me, at face value, it seems kind of difficult to do that in the podcast space, because you're measuring the entire show, and you got to really, do something quite ambitious to sort of create a dog walker podcast, because that's quite a lot of production that goes into it versus print ad or a single display ad or some sort of stunt. So I don't know, just this was the first award show that I saw that got my interest, that seemed to be exciting.
So we have Glenn, Dave in the chat. He says, I would say not indie focus. And this was kind of the impression you got, right? Like,
well, when I went over, I didn't expect to see like tons of indie podcasts.
right.
But when every single one says from, and it's a network, I went, wow, there's no one here that it's like the blah, blah, blah show by Stephen Jones and,
Right.
Nancy such and such. And I was
Which
like,
is something so the long-standing podcast awards, the OG of awards, right, is
Right.
Todd's Awards. Are they just called the podcast awards? Like
the People's Choice podcast.
The People's Choice,
Awards.
right? Which is great that I think it's generic podcast awards, because that's how dominant it is in the indie space. It like really does represent shows that I promise probably you'd have not heard of, right? So because they were the nominations were user submitted, so it's submitted by the audience, which at some point became gamed as well, right? That they fell victim to being gamed, because you could just, if you turned out your audience more than someone else turned out their audience, I don't know if that's gamed, but there were ways that it was gamed. So, and they fixed that. But we had a little talk about this before we went live, Dave and I, about, who's nominating, how are they being put up there, who's deciding to nominate. So I don't know that we know enough. I don't know the answers to that. Because Dave, as you're saying, like they're all coming out of networks. Like, how did these get nominated? You said that you think if you're a member, which we're members, and it's partly my fault, I guess, because I didn't nominate anyone.
Yeah, I remember them saying it's time, and I remember thinking, okay, I'll get right around to that. And then I got the email, this is your final time, and I'm like, right after I get done doing this, and then all of a sudden, like, and here are your nominees. I was like, oh crap, I never voted. So I can't really complain, because I had a chance to voice my opinion and then didn't. I will say I find it frustrating that like Wondery has one here that's got multiple nominations called Bunga Bunga with Whitney Cummings, and it looks like, I forget the comedian's name, but anyway, I was like, I went to listen to this, and none of the links on them, there are no links. Like if I want to go listen to the show, I have to now go to an app and search for it. I'm like,
it's a miss.
I'm like, especially because if it was, when it says Wondery right at the top, and the head of Wondery was the head of this whole thing, I was like, again, miss, yeah. And wait a minute, now except at the top, okay, yeah, there's a link at Bunga Bunga at the top, but it's a link to the page that it's on, so it's not a link. So, which again is even more frustrating.
And again, first year, that could be growing pains,
right?
So if you're listening, Rob could be listening. Although I don't know these part of it. Anyways, make the suggestion, fix it, and we'll see these things change. But this brings back. We talked about Spotify, and I don't think you can sample a Spotify podcast on the web, which is insane. Like you have to open the app. It's like, I don't have that app. I don't want that app. Like to not be able to sample, like that just seems like a failure to me. But Apple finally got good at this, right? So all your podcasts have a page on the web. So it became a thing where it used to be if you link to your podcast on Apple, you would click it and it could launch the Apple app. If you had it, that was fine. But I think there became a point where we were like, don't link to Apple because not everyone's using Apple, shocker, right? So that excludes all people on Google. Well, now that it's in a web browser, if you link to Apple, at least someone can sample the podcast. Can I press play and hear, do I want to go and find this podcast on the platform that I listen on, right? You should have links to all of the platforms so no one has to make that choice. But I think Spotify doesn't even do this. So Spotify, I know you're listening. Let's get your heads out of your podcatcher and do that.
I do know that James Cridlin from podnews.net has a link, he said in his podcast today, that if you go to his website and look, he said he actually has links to the nominees. And it appears that he does, because I can see there's a link to Bunga Bunga. And also who's hosting these people, which is interesting.
Yeah. James reveals a lot of cool stuff. I will say, James, when I go, we do get stories from Pod News, and when you go to a Pod News, at least the way I get there, I'm never sure where the story is completely. Like the headline, I'm like, then there's a bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, is this the story? Do I click here? So, Cridlin, that's just a little, as a user experience.
I also skip over the classified ads, but I know I'm not supposed to.
Well, I
because
mean,
they're supposed to stand out, right? You know.
right.
And for the record, Bunga Bunga is about the ex-president of Italy, Silvio
there you go.
Berlusconi.
Well, there you go.
He had,
He
he had sex parties
All right.
called Bunga Bunga parties.
Oh, well, maybe I will listen.
Now
See,
Dave's
you lost
in.
me. Now you
Now
got
I will
me.
listen.
Dave's in. That's it. It's, see, you
sold-
have to
sold.
just choose the right tagline.
Right.
Just the showrunner and me.
Clearly experienced. Awesome. Well, I mean, there's probably not much more to say about that, I don't think, other than
They're
I don't
out.
know.
Good luck.
And if you're-
Good luck to all the nominees.
Yeah, good
Yeah.
luck, guys. It's an honor being nominated.
podcast awards. Like that's a whole. Like I don't care. Like
Yeah.
Like
Interestingly, the awards are selected by a blue ribbon panel of judges.
right.
And I don't know what you do. I don't know what you have to do to be at a blue ribbon panel. Maybe this is an American. Is this an American thing? Because in Canada
Yes.
we don't have blue ribbon panels. Is that an American thing? Seriously?
I mean, you mean is the Podcast Academy an American thing?
No, the concept of a blue ribbon panel.
Oh,
Blue
it's
ribbon is
someone very old made up that tagline. Okay, that's what that is.
Somebody
it's-
just came back
come
from
on,
the
man.
fair, apparently.
So it's the millennial in me.
Someone copy pasted from their MySpace page.
Wow.
Nice.
Sorry, Rob, if you came up with that, man, I don't know who came up with that, but yeah, come on, that doesn't say anything to. I don't know. No,
And blue ribbon is capitalized.
I've been on those panels. Whatever. Like it's cool. Congrats, Dave. You have an award, right? Where is I see it? No, that's Hall of Fame. There's the
Yeah,
award.
There we go.
There you go.
2017 Best Technology. 2020 is on its way, according to Todd. He's having, it's so weird now that it's we're into March and we're still kind of going, mail, whatever, it'll get here. Like we kind of did that around Christmas because we understood
Right.
Christmas extra, but it's like it's March now. We're still kind of going, I don't know. It's the mail. What are you gonna do?
It's not like you're worried about someone stealing off your porch. You're home.
Right.
Always.
I love it how it's now become like you used to put something on a boat from Europe and send it over, and it's kind of the same thing now where you're just like, it might get here, it might not. We don't know.
Yeah.
Chances are not.
Yeah.
I don't track
yeah,
anything.
For the record, Canada Post is just as bad.
If you do send somebody something, add a note. I had somebody send me a bottle of something. It could be olive oil or it's wine.
Yeah.
I have a last name and their address, but there was no note, and I'm not drinking anything unless I know who it came from.
I had a bottle of wine the other night that was screw top, so that tells you something. But it was unscrewed and none had been taken out, and I don't remember. Maybe the previous bottle of wine made me do that, and I cut my. But I basically took it one glass a night because I'm like, I don't know what I'm still drinking it. Let's not kid ourselves. If I'm poisoned, I want to be poisoned a little bit.
Yeah.
Warn my family.
There you
and then
go.
be okay.
The new thing now too is you'll send a package for somebody's birthday, for example. It'll arrive 3 weeks later. You look like a jerk because
Right.
you didn't send them or wish them a happy birthday or even call them because you're like, the gift is going to do it all. And so now you have to tell people that a surprise is coming in advance in hopes that it gets there on time. And if it doesn't, you'll know why. It's not me.
Soon it'll be a drone and it'll be there. You could literally be within minutes of deciding you can wake up that day and be like, I forgot. Hey, Dave, I can't believe this is on your list of stories because I just made reference to sharing the Apple link. Why don't you tell us that story, Dave?
Yeah, this is just something that we've been saying forever, and that is so many people, they want to be at the top of Apple Podcast charts because, that ensures financial
Dominance.
freedom for the rest of your life and millions, and a shot on Jimmy Fallon. This is speaking of James Cridland. This is an article, and just saying that Android is gaining against iOS on a worldwide basis, and globally now 69% of people are on an Android. In Asia, it's 74%. North America, it's 60.
Wait a minute. On just on the OS, is that what it's saying, or does it have to do with podcasting? Because I thought they were already dominant. Doesn't mean people listen to podcasts. I mean, we can toss to your boss Rob there, who makes.
Well, I guess my whole point is, I just see people all the time, and you mentioned it, where they throw out an Apple link, and it used to be you really just kind of screwed the pooch when you did that. At least now they can listen, but the goal is not listens, the goal is subscribers. And I've never understood why this is a question. In my opinion, send them to your website where you have a subscribe link right there, ready for them to click. And then if you're doing the whole Facebook thing and you want to track them, you can place the pixel, which is two for the price of one.
I think the only argument becomes more clicks means you've siphoned off a person each time, right? If I have to click two things, I mean, I don't know about you, but if I have to click two things, forget it. I'm out. I clicked one thing. You didn't take me to where I was trying to go.
Two is too much. Two is too much.
Yeah, I would send them to the episode where they can click play, but then have subscribe links under the player.
So you're sending them to your website,
right?
Maybe probably the landing page for that episode,
right?
But then they have to click play when they get there. They have to know.
So
that
that's two clicks. Well, if you send them a link to Apple, they still got to click play when they get there. Plus, the other thing is, so if we send them to podcastersroundtable.com, they go to that episode, they click play, and now they sit there and listen. And whether they actually sit there and listen is many times it's just like, oh, this is cool, and then they go to their phone. But nonetheless, if they do and they sit there, well, now Google goes, that's weird. Every time somebody uses that link in a search result, they go over there and they sit there for like 10 minutes. That must be really good content. So Google's going to kind of go, that must be good.
Does that work? I mean, I guess time on page work, because they're not tracking the player outside of it. Can you even embed Google Podcasts on your own website? There's a good question. They have. So Google Podcasts, Google has tried to get back into podcasting. Mm-hmm. You have Google Podcasts. They also, you can link to Google and it brings you to probably even I don't know if it's better, but another good listing of your podcast in the browser, right?
You could. Because if you go to podcast.google.com and find your show.
This just making me think, well, wait, if I can embed a Google podcast, because look, a player on your website is not for people to listen to your podcast. Like one or two people will be like, I come to your website every week to listen to your podcast. You're like, okay, I don't know what year you're stuck in, but that's just not, that's not the thing. It is a sample. It is an opportunity for someone to decide, do they want to go to a podcatcher, to a podcast directory and subscribe, right? So you're probably not going to see good retention outside of just a really good episode that people are on social and they're like, for some reason they've decided that I wasn't planning to listen to an hour of something, but I'm going to now, right? And that's also what people don't understand about social and podcasts, that people are not ready in a position to listen to something for an hour while they're scrolling Twitter. It's appointment viewing. I don't know if they call it. No, appointment viewing is where you have to show up at the right time, right? This is, people listen to podcasts because it's their time to commute, not anymore. It's their time to work out, mow the lawn, whatever it is, right? Not scrolling Twitter. But now I'm thinking, Dave, if I can embed a Google Podcast player on my site, do I get more juice? Because again, the player is not for the subscriber. The player is for the person it's the impulse buy at the supermarket. So if there's something I can do to help Google say, because we know Google's supposed to be indexing podcasts in theory, eventually there may be, the way they used to surface YouTube videos in your search results at the very top, if the answer to someone's question, their Google, is in your podcast and Google's able to transcribe and surface that, they will start showing you to that. So anything that I can do to help Google do that. So Dave, do you know? We probably...
No, I was just in there playing. You can get a link to an episode on Google Podcasts, but there is no embeddable player.
Google. So this is my point, because I know Google is listening. Yeah. They're not, but give us a player, man, and then tell us why we'd want to use it as podcasters.
Yeah, because you do get You can go into Google Podcast Manager and see how far people have listened, just like you can in Apple and
Right.
Spotify and the other ones. So it'd be cool if we had a player that then
Well,
tracked that.
Instead of including an Apple link and a Google link
Yeah.
or whatever, what about a smart link through Chartable that at
Yep.
least gives you the option to or at least either kicks you to their favorite player of choice or gives you the option to choose.
Yeah.
That's
Which
what we
is
do a lot.
Which is also a feature in my podcast reviews
That's right.
by our own Daniel J. Lewis. So smart links, they're fun.
Nice.
Smart links, it just determines on what you have in your phone already. Is that what's going on? Because it's not, maybe even your
Yeah.
desktop apps, maybe because.
Yep.
And if you don't have one of the devices that are in a smart link, what happens?
It smacks you in the face and says,
As it should.
I
It
honestly don't know
sends
what
you
it
to
does.
it. It sends you to a bit of it sends you to a landing page which gives you the option for
Chartable?
all the apps you can
Does
choose.
it send you to a page on Chartable though?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Can't you
there's
play
always
it from
this blend
Chartable
of-
directly?
I'm sorry.
Can't you play it from Chartable directly?
You could also do that, but
Yeah.
not many people are gonna do that. I think.
Well, there's always the push and pull between sharing your website and someone else's.
Totally. Yeah.
Again, sharing. Like, what are we even talking about? We're talking about social, right? We're talking about in an email.
Emails. Yeah.
You really just got to think of yourself as the person who's receiving this. Think, we have to be careful about being biased. Like we have a lot of bias about how we consume things, and we make a lot of assumptions about, other people must do this too, right? Even what I'm saying about web players may not be true. Maybe there's a massive audience that uses web players, but just be conscious of your own bias when you're thinking about how. But you should think of even go through the experience. Like if you're sharing links on Twitter, I hope that you're also clicking through those and seeing what that experience is like. Try it on your mobile, try it on your desktop. Like what are the things you're asking people to do? Do the things try to those people to do. You might find that you're like, this is terrible. Sorry for doing that, right? Or just how it could be done better. All right, we did cross. We hit the hour mark. When we get into stories by Dave, we've done a good job because that means we've gone over the guest stories. All right, we usually don't eclipse. It's usually half hour on the first story, which we almost did. But
Either that or our topics were so terrible we just had to get past them as
brushed
quick as
over.
possible.
No, it was all good. I mean, it's funny as a podcaster, you know right immediately when you stop record with your co-host or with an interview, you immediately be like, that was a good one. Or you're like, not so good, right? And maybe the edit can help in that one. But you always know. So these are conversations about podcast. They're always good for me. Doesn't mean they're good for the audience, but
Right.
I enjoyed it. So I'm going to say thank you. You're going to tell us where we can find your podcast. And I guess we're going to head out here. Unless you have another thing that you wanted to say that you didn't get to say, please say it. But Noel, thanks for joining us, man.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you again for the invite. I was really glad to jump on board with you guys. Again, my name is Noel. I am the founder and co-host of Hidden Gems, a film podcast, and you can find it on any podcast platform that you enjoy.
Awesome. Who is your co-host?
So my co-host is actually my wife, which is fun. So that's it's kind of like a little couple there. So again, I have a lot of background in film and writing, and she is just an average film fan. So we kind of attack these.
Careful with
these
the word
films.
"just." I'm very careful.
Well, that's what she said. That's how we describe it. So
Okay.
that,
And careful
so
with the
that-
word average.
Yeah, it's a tagline.
Right.
So
it's a tagline.
Approved
because
tagline.
if you listen to my intro, I literally list all my credits. Practically, I'm a writer, actor, filmmaker, screenplay writer, television critic, and she's like, and I'm just a film fan. So it's kind of like that. It juxtaposes that. So that's kind of where we're coming from.
Dave, is his marriage doomed now that he decided to start a podcast with his significant?
Nice, congrats,
It
man.
shouldn't be in theory.
Okay. All right.
Let's
I'm
hope
just
not.
trying to lean in on your own experience at that.
No,
You've
mine was
tried it. You've tried
Yeah,
it. Both.
I started a podcast because we thought if we would record ourselves arguing, we could then go, let's go back to the tape. What did you say there? And,
Brilliant.
Yeah, it turned out that didn't work.
That
You're
is
gonna
some,
lose anyway. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That is some. What is this? The Netflix series, The Dark? No, what is that? Anyways, that's some
Yeah.
sci-fi stuff there. It would have been funny if I remember the name of the show. All right. Anyways, Roger, thanks so much, man.
Thanks so much for having me. So to learn more about Jar Audio, check out jaraudio.com and check us out on social as well. So jar_audio on Twitter, and then we're on LinkedIn as well. And I'm on Twitter as well as jar_Roger.
Why would this audience, who is, I would say, mostly Noels, they're independent podcasters, why would they follow Jar Audio?
Because we're great at what we do when it comes to producing podcasts. And even though we work with big brands, we always like to say that we're just creating a great podcast that happens to be brought to you by a brand. So we share a lot of information on our site about how to create a podcast, how to grow an audience, how to engage with that audience, and how to, keep producing great content. So that's what you get from us.
Cool. That's the key. I think a lot of this audience wants to know, and for me, I'm always interested in someone who is plugged into a bigger brand, which is another way of saying someone with a budget, right? So independent podcasters can learn a lot by like what someone with more money can do. And then you find a way, those things can be translated to an independent podcaster, someone with a lesser budget, maybe not with the full impact if you had all that money, but there are lessons to be learned there. So that would be a good reason to follow along, I think. So it's always good to get some insights, even if you're an indie podcaster. I would say especially if you're an indie podcaster. Let someone else spend the money, learn the lessons, and then take that information and apply it to your podcast.
Exactly.
Very
Apply
cool.
that
All
to
right.
any business as well.
That's right. That's right.
Dave
of the trade,
Jackson,
man.
co-host. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks. This was fun. You can find me over at schoolofpodcasting.com where I help you plan, launch, grow, and monetize your podcast.
I feel like that you've put a new word in there.
I did. Well, it's kind of like
Feels
this
longer.
whole thing. You're
Okay.
like, Dave, shouldn't you be mentioning this part of, it's like, because it used to just be plan, launch, and grow. And then somebody said, well, don't you have a book on monetization? I'm like, yeah, but usually it's, so what I should do is like launch, grow, like plan, launch, grow. So we're losing launch because that's part of grow. So plan, grow, and monetize your podcast. There we go.
Yeah, I think this is probably some mastermind you could probably join
Yeah.
to learn exactly what 4 words you should actually have. there.
Exactly. Because it's usually 3, but that's what's the problem.
That's why, it stuck out to me, Dave. I was
That's
like, what's
it.
going
I
on
was like,
here?
wait, what? There's 4
rule of
words?
4 words.
Crazy.
I stopped at 3 words. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Dave. And if you want to be on a roundtable, certainly if you are listening or watching this far, because as I said, people don't listen to the end. Once they know the end's coming, if you've signaled, okay, well, that people stop, they're out. Like if you look at your YouTube stats, look at your Apple stats, your Google stats, you see retention drop off the freaking wall when you start to signal that you're at the end of an episode. So something to think about the way you end your episodes. But if you are still part of this, if you're listening, thank you, by the way, you're the hardcores. You're exactly who would be on the roundtable. So we want to see you on the roundtable. podcastersroundtable.com/guest. Sign up. Again, takes a while, but we'll get you on here, and then we'll do this thing. All right? So thanks, everyone. We will see you for 155, and we're out of here. Wave goodbye.